10-year-old Ava just wanted to help her mom. But what started as a humble lemonade stand turned into a life-changing moment when Barron Trump stepped out of a black SUV and left an entire neighborhood speechless. On the corner of a quiet street in Wichita, Kansas, a young girl named Ava sat behind a weathered wooden table. Her hands gripped a marker, adding the final touches to a sign. Lemonade for Mom's Chemo. It was written in big, uneven letters, the kind that only a child could make. Beside her sat a plastic pitcher filled with lemonade, cups stacked neatly beside it, and a small metal jar already holding a few crumpled dollar bills. Ava wasn't just selling lemonade for fun. She had a mission. Her mother, struggling against a relentless illness, had fallen behind on her medical bills. At only 10 years old, Ava knew she couldn't do much to help, but she could do this. Every afternoon after school, she would drag her table to the same spot, rain or shine, and wait for someone, anyone, to stop and buy a cup. But not every passerby was kind. Some rushed past without so much as a glance. Others threw her pitiful looks but didn't stop. Ava didn't blame them. People had their own lives and problems. Still, her small hands would tighten around the edges of the table, refusing to let go of hope. She would smile through it all, her mother's words echoing in her mind. A kind heart always finds a way. Her neighbors were familiar with her stand by now. Some had stopped by once or twice. Others made it a habit to grab a cup on their way home. But as the days turned into weeks, the stream of customers had slowed. Ava knew she needed to do more to keep her stand alive, but she had no idea how much things were about to change. Kindness can show up when you least expect it, her mom always said, but Ava didn't know just how true those words would become. The early weeks had been promising. Ava's lemonade stand was a small beacon of hope, drawing curious neighbors and kind strangers alike. Mrs. Turner, the elderly woman who lived 3 houses down, had been her most loyal customer, always handing her a $5 bill with a smile. "Keep the change, sweetie," she'd say every time, her voice a mix of encouragement and sympathy. But as the novelty wore off, the stream of customers dwindled. Ava would sit for hours, her chin resting on her hands, watching cars pass by without even slowing. Her little jar, once jingling with coins, now barely made a sound when she shook it. Still, she didn't give up. Every day after school, she would set up her stand, determined to make a difference for her mom. Some days were harder than others, like the time a group of teenagers sped by in a car, shouting something cruel and laughing as they threw an empty soda can in her direction. Ava flinched, but she didn't cry. Instead, she picked up the can, tossed it into a nearby trash bin, and sat back down. Her resolve was stronger than her hurt. Her neighborhood was a mix of people. Some were kind and supportive, like Mrs. Turner or the local mailman, Mr. Jansen, who always made a point to buy a cup and tell her a corny joke. But others seemed indifferent, too wrapped up in their own lives to notice the little girl with the big sign. One afternoon, as Ava sat waiting, a middle-aged man in a business suit walked by. He paused, glanced at her sign, and shook his head. "Chemo's expensive, kid," he muttered, dropping $1 on the table. Ava managed a small, "Thank you," but the sting of his words lingered. Her mom, Emily, noticed the strain in her daughter's eyes one evening as they sat at the dinner table. "You don't have to do this, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You're just a kid. It's not your job to fix everything." "But I want to, Mom," Ava replied, her voice trembling. "I don't want you to worry about money anymore." Her mom reached across the table, taking Ava's small hands in hers. "Just having you by my side is enough for me." But Ava didn't believe that. She wanted to do more, and she wasn't ready to quit. That's when a strange convoy of black SUVs appeared in the distance, turning onto their street, and everything began to change. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street as Ava refilled her lemonade pitcher. The day had been slow, and the ache in her legs from sitting so long reminded her how little she'd sold. She was about to pack up when she noticed something unusual, a string of sleek black SUVs rolling down her quiet suburban street. Ava straightened, her heart fluttering with curiosity. The cars were out of place here, where most people drove modest sedans or well-worn pickups. Neighbors peeked out of their windows, curtains drawn back slightly, wondering who could warrant such an entrance. The convoy slowed as it approached Ava's stand, and for a moment she thought they'd drive past like everyone else. But the lead SUV came to a halt right in front of her. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation as the door opened. Out stepped a tall, young man dressed in a sharp navy suit. He looked familiar, but Ava couldn't place him. Her neighbors, however, recognized him immediately. Murmurs rippled through the street. "Is that Barron Trump?" Ava blinked in surprise as the towering figure walked toward her. His presence was commanding but not intimidating. He looked down at her sign, his expression softening. "Lemonade for your mom's chemo?" he asked, his voice calm and measured. "Yes, sir," Ava replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Barron smiled faintly and pulled out his wallet. But instead of buying a cup, he turned toward the SUVs and gestured for someone inside. The rear door of the second vehicle opened, and a man in a dark coat emerged carrying what looked like a briefcase. The neighbors watched in stunned silence, their curiosity growing with every passing second. What could he possibly be doing? Barron leaned down, speaking to Ava softly. "I'd like to help. Would you mind if I stayed a while?" Ava nodded, still too shocked to say much. But as he stood by her lemonade stand, something remarkable began to unfold, and the quiet street would never be the same again. As Barron stood by Ava's humble lemonade stand, the tension on the street was palpable. Neighbors slowly stepped out of their homes, drawn by the surreal sight of a public figure in their little suburban enclave. Some held their phones at the ready, recording what was quickly becoming an unforgettable moment. Barron turned to the man with the briefcase, who clicked it open to reveal stacks of neatly arranged cash. Gasps echoed from the gathering crowd. Ava's eyes widened as Barron pulled out a bundle of bills and placed it gently in her jar. "For your mom," he said, his voice steady but warm. "This is for her to get the care she needs." Ava looked at the jar, now overflowing with more money than she had ever seen in her life. "Are you sure?" she whispered, her small voice trembling. "Absolutely," Barron replied, crouching down to meet her eye level. "You've already done something incredible by trying to help your mom. The least I can do is help you both." The crowd began to cheer, the sound growing louder as the weight of the moment sank in. Mrs. Turner, the elderly neighbor, wiped a tear from her cheek. Mr. Jansen, the mailman, gave Ava a proud nod from his spot on the sidewalk, but Barron wasn't done. He turned back to the convoy and waved over a second man who carried a small stack of documents. "This isn't just about money," Barron said, addressing Ava and the growing crowd. "I've arranged for your mom to receive the best treatment available. She won't have to worry about the cost anymore." Ava's legs wobbled as she tried to process what was happening. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she lunged forward and hugged him tightly. The crowd erupted into applause. "This isn't just for you," Barron added, standing and addressing the onlookers. "It's a reminder that even the smallest efforts can inspire others to do good." Ava showed more courage and love than most adults ever could. Ava's mother, having heard the commotion from their house, appeared at the door. Her frail frame leaned against the doorway for support, her face a mixture of confusion and disbelief. When Ava ran to her, dragging the jar of cash behind her, tears streamed down both their faces. Barron approached them slowly, offering a kind smile and a handshake. "Your daughter is extraordinary," he said to Ava's mom. "She's a reflection of your strength." Before he left, Barron bought a cup of lemonade, not because he needed it, but because he wanted to show Ava that her efforts mattered. And as the SUVs rolled away, the crowd stood in awe. But the impact of his actions was only just beginning. The buzz from Barron's visit didn't die down. It exploded. Within hours, social media lit up with videos and photos of the event, spreading far beyond their small neighborhood. Ava's story became a viral sensation, with people from across the country moved by her determination and Barron's unexpected generosity. Strangers began reaching out, offering donations, words of encouragement, and even services for Ava's mother. But the most remarkable change wasn't online. It was right there in Ava's neighborhood. Inspired by what they had witnessed, neighbors began rallying around Ava and her family. Mrs. Turner, the elderly woman from down the street, organized a bake sale, donating every cent to Ava's cause. Mr. Jansen, the mailman, started a local GoFundMe campaign, which quickly surpassed its modest goal within days. Even the businessman who had once dismissed Ava's efforts returned, this time with a heartfelt apology and a significant contribution. The community transformed. Where there had once been indifference, there was now a collective spirit of kindness and generosity. Families who barely spoke to one another before began working together, brainstorming ways to help Ava's mom and others in need. One weekend, a group of neighbors surprised Ava and her mother by painting their house and repairing the worn-down porch. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about creating a space of hope and support for a family that had inspired them all. For Ava, it was overwhelming but also deeply touching. She couldn't believe how her small lemonade stand had turned into something so much bigger. Yet, amidst all the attention and activity, she never lost sight of her original goal, helping her mom. Her mom, once hesitant to accept help, was overcome with gratitude. "I never imagined people could care this much," she admitted one evening, as she sat on their newly repaired porch with Ava. "You've shown me how much good there is in the world." Ava looked up at her mom, a shy smile spreading across her face. "I didn't do it alone," she said. "It's because everyone decided to care." But while the community basked in the newfound unity, the story wasn't over yet. A surprise letter arrived in the mail one day bearing a presidential seal. It was an invitation to a formal event at the White House, one that promised to take Ava's story to an even larger stage. Ava stared at the envelope in her hands, her fingers tracing the golden presidential seal. She glanced at her mom, whose eyes filled with a mix of pride and disbelief. "We're really going to the White House?" Ava whispered, her voice barely audible. The days leading up to the event were a whirlwind. The neighbors, who had already rallied around Ava's family in countless ways, helped prepare her for the big day. Mrs. Turner lent Ava a beautiful dress, one she had been saving for special occasions. Mr. Jansen offered to drive them to the airport, refusing to take no for an answer. The small community that once seemed distant and fractured now felt like an extended family. When the day finally arrived, Ava and her mom were greeted at the White House with the kind of warmth that made them feel at ease despite the grandeur. They were ushered into a room filled with reporters, dignitaries, and other guests. Standing at the podium, Barron Trump spoke with a calm confidence that immediately drew attention. "Ava's story isn't just about lemonade or even about helping her mom," he began, his voice resonating with sincerity. "It's about the power of small acts of kindness. It's about how one person's courage can inspire an entire community and beyond." He turned to Ava, who stood beside her mother. "Ava, you reminded me and so many others that even the smallest efforts can change lives. You didn't wait for someone else to act. You took the first step." The crowd erupted in applause as Ava's cheeks flushed with a mixture of pride and humility. For the first time, she stepped forward to the microphone, gripping its edge tightly. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke with a voice steadier than she expected. "I just wanted to help my mom," she said simply. "But now I know that when we help each other, we can do so much more." Her words were met with another wave of applause, but what struck Ava most wasn't the clapping. It was the faces in the crowd. Some were teary-eyed, others smiled with genuine warmth. For the first time, she truly felt the weight of what her actions had inspired. Back home, things didn't magically become perfect. Her mom still faced challenges with her health, but the financial burden was gone, and the community support remained steadfast. Ava continued her lemonade stand, not out of necessity, but because she wanted to donate the money to other families in need. The neighbors, once scattered and distant, had built lasting bonds. Mrs. Turner hosted weekly potlucks, and Mr. Jansen spearheaded a program to help struggling families in their area. Ava's lemonade stand had become a symbol, not just of kindness, but of what could happen when people came together. Ava's mom, sitting on their repaired porch one evening, reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. "You've made me proud in ways I can't even put into words," she said softly. "You've shown me that, no matter how hard life gets, there's always good to be found." Ava smiled, the warmth of her mom's words filling her chest. "You taught me that, Mom. Life's challenges may sometimes feel overwhelming, But Ava's story reminds us all that even the smallest gestures can spark incredible change. If this story moved you, share it, and let it inspire you to look for ways to make a difference in your own life. And don't forget to subscribe for more uplifting stories like this one.